The parliamentary week has come to a fiery close. A Liberal MP forced to apologise after making this comment that questioned the independence of the Reserve Bank.
Glenn Stevens has been caught out. He put up the interest rates before the election, during the election when the rest of the world were bringing down interest rates, and now in a way to cover the government's inept behaviour, they're bringing down interest rates at probably the most rapid rate Australia's ever seen. It really is chaotic, shambolic.
The MP apologised just a few hours later, no doubt after a swift rebuke from the opposition leader Malcolm Turnbull, but that was not good enough for the government. They wanted the Liberal leader to repudiate the comments in Parliament.
And I'm pleased he's had the sense to come into the House and to apologise. But that's not enough. What is required is a complete repudiation of his statements by the Leader of the Opposition. That is what is required. And what is required is an apology from the Leader of the Opposition for the slurs that have been cast on the Treasury Secretary and for his personal attack on the Treasury Secretary.
The opposition tried and failed to censure the government, the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, over the government's response to the financial crisis. Mr Rudd used the censure debate to target his opposite numbers comments earlier in the week that raised the prospect of the Secretary of the Treasury, Ken Henry, being sacked if his advice was wrong.
He said that his remarks about the Secretary of the Treasury at the dispatch box the other day were the warmest remarks that could be made of Dr Henry as he could. The warmest remarks he could make of Dr Henry as he could. It's strange when you make such warm remarks that in the process of this extension of warmth, you then threaten to sack them. That is a strange expression of warmth in the part of the world that I come from.
The government, for its part, used its numbers twice to pass motions calling on the opposition leader to front the chamber and apologise for comments he'd made about the Treasury Secretary and the comments of his colleagues. Mr Turnbull, though, said he'd do nothing of the sort.
There they are, the gang of four. Comrade Kev, Comrade Wayne, Comrade Albo, yes, and Madam Julia, there she is. There they are. That's the gang of four. It's fine for the Prime Minister to embrace Asian values, but I don't think we should start with the Red Guards and the Little Red Book of Chairman Mao, because messy and disconcerting though it may be, we live in a democracy and this is a parliament, and we have a right to debate these issues, Mr Speaker, and we will. And no control freak Prime Minister is going to be able to silence the opposition.
Joining me on PM Agenda now, the National Affairs correspondent at the Australian newspaper, Jennifer Hewett. Jennifer, thanks for your time. It was your story on Tuesday of this week that really sparked all of this furore around the advice of the Reserve Bank. Do you and the papers stand by the report 100%?
Well, yes, as you've seen, what we're dealing with is extraordinary circumstances. And as we have published in our paper this morning, the Reserve Bank has been extremely concerned about how to deal with the practical but very serious dislocation that is occurring in the markets as a result of the guarantee. You know, these are unprecedented circumstances. This is a very difficult thing to work out. But clearly the RBA, the Treasury and the government are having great difficulties in trying to stabilise the market now after and trying to figure out how this guarantee will work.
I should give you the right of reply, though. The Treasury Secretary yesterday said that your article was fallacious and wrong. Now, what do you say to that?
Well, what I say is that clearly the Australian has been covering this issue extensively, and that Ken Henry talked about the details that had to be worked out, and in a sense you kind of get to the issue of nuances. What are details to be worked out as opposed to concerns. This was a very frantic weekend. There was obviously a lot of discussion going on, and there was, a huge amount of uncertainty about how this would all play out. But I think we've got to understand that the RBA is obviously close to the market. It is trying to understand, and it would have been concerned at the time about how this whole system would be implemented. I mean, it would be just bizarre if it didn't foresee problems in terms of its practical implementation, given that it understands the market, and its job is to understand the market and the likely reaction.
The email today that's been published in The Australian, though, was dated the 17th of October. So the concerns, it seems, from the RBA, at least as far as that email goes, were 5 days after the Prime Minister announced that guarantee. So isn't it conceivable then that the RBA did support the blanket guarantee to kick off with, just to get a mechanism in place to guarantee deposits, but then as you say, as this was being implemented, the problems emerged, and then subsequently articulated their concerns about the impact on the money markets and the other implications?
Well, obviously the RBA, would endorse government policy. I mean, it's as Glenn Stevens says, it's the government's job to endorse policy. But I think it's very clear that the RBA has been concerned. It didn't just get concerned on Friday about how this would work out in the market. I think that's very obvious.
Hey, Jennifer, well, in terms of the reporting though on Tuesday, it said that the government had ignored the RBA's strongly voiced concerns. Does the email necessarily reflect that, though? The fact that email was of the 17th of October, it was 5 days after they made the announcement. So does it mean they ignored the concerns when it was after the fact?
Well, I must say I don't think it was ever contemplated, it certainly wasn't contemplated by the Australian at the time, that the RBA would not have been in direct contact with the government on that weekend. But certainly they saw at the time, and the government has said, that from the Monday morning they were trying to, work out these issues, how it would actually play out in practice. So naturally the RBA supports government policy. It's the government's job to make policy. But it doesn't mean that they don't understand that there are great practical implications and many problems and difficulties to be worked out. And it would be, in a sense, quite peculiar if the RBA, whose job it is to look, part of its job is to understand how the market operates, would not understand it. It was clearly concerned at the time.